Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Granantiye Bhurida Jana. So this Sunday we'll be discussing the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Last Sunday we had a special program, but before that, if you recollect, we were discussing the Great Master, which is a biography of Sri Ramakrishna, based on the original Bengali Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasang. So the idea behind discussing these two books alternately is that the life of a prophet or a saint cannot be separated from his message. If you have to understand the message, which in this case is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as recorded by his disciple Mahendranath Gupta, then you have to understand the significance of his words, his universal message, in the light of his own life. They cannot be separated. The life is a commentary on the message. Academically, there are many commentaries written on the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and all other scriptures. Some of them are a result of a deep realization. Many of the acharyas, like Shankaracharya and other acharyas, they wrote commentaries which help us to understand the basic message of the scripture, the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads, because they shed light upon those sacred scriptures and try to explain it to the common people based on their own experiences. They are not academicians. One has to keep this in mind, that to be an academic scholar teaching Upanishads or to be an academic scholar trying to explain the Bhagavad Gita and its commentaries by the various acharyas is entirely different than the very commentaries themselves. For example, if we take the life of Shankaracharya, the life reflects, in a way, the experiences that he has mentioned in the commentaries. They are not based on an intellectual understanding of the verses of the scripture, Gita or Upanishads. They are his own life experiences, which he has put in words because he had the gift of the language in which he spoke. He was a master of that language. And language helps you to articulate the nature of the experience you have. Then it becomes a commentary. Otherwise, it's just an academic exercise. Maybe one can get a PhD for that. But it will not be worthwhile, except for getting a few degrees and some doctorate, etc. So this thing was made very clear in Sri Ramakrishna's life, especially in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, where M or Mahendranath Gupta has taken care to point out now and then that these are not words of a scholar. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna was illiterate in the sense we understand. Normally in the secular world, you are having a few degrees, you consider a person literate. In that sense, he never went to the university. So Swami Vivekananda said he was saved a lot of trouble by not attending the university, whereas we had to unlearn what we learned, some of the second-hand knowledge which was given to us by our professors, the ideas of other people which we had to remember and express in our examinations. So there was hardly any originality in our learning. This was admitted by none other than Swami Vivekananda, who was one of the most brightest students of his college, Presidency College, and later on Scottish Church College, where he had the benefit of modern education. And he says, what a difficult task it was to unlearn what I learned in the university and have a fresh approach, an original approach to the religious ideas and philosophy of Vedanta at the feet of my master, who might not have gone to any university, but whose whole university was nature itself. It was because he says he was original, 100 times more original than me, because he was not parroting or repeating others' ideas. He was speaking from the depth of his own experience, based on his own understanding through sadhana or through upasana of the scriptures which he had heard. It is not that he did not hear. Very often, Sri Ramakrishna, somebody asked him, how do you manage to tell so many things? You quote from Vedas, you quote from Upanishads, you have never been to university, you have never been to any school. Even he dropped out of school. So when he was asked, he made a very pertinent remark. He said, maybe I have not read, but how much have I heard? So you all know that when he was in Kamarpukur, most of the pilgrims, the monks and the scholars and all those who went on pilgrimage to Puri had to pass through that village. And very often they would be given shelter there. And they would speak, as a return for the hospitality that the village people offered to them. They would in return speak something about the Bhagavata, the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, whatever they knew, and shared it with these people. And Sri Ramakrishna was a very, you may say, avid listener. He said, how much have I listened? You people think where do I get all this information? He said, and we all know the wonderful talent he had. He could remember anything that was repeated to him or that he heard, so much so that he could just go on repeating the verses he had heard even once. That was the phenomenal memory he had. But at the same time, he was not just satisfied if some pandit or some monk who was passing by expressed certain ideas. He would question. Even at his very young age, you will see, Sri Ramakrishna would question him, and very often came with original answers, which left the pandits astounded. So that is why Vivekananda Narendranath, his disciple, said, I had the privilege of having a guru who was the most original person I have ever come across in my life. And for the first time, like M after him, it was not just Swami Vivekananda or Naren who had this experience. M tried to argue. M, as you all know, Mahendranath Gupta was quite, very well educated, having a MA in those days. He was very good in English and Persian. He also knew Bengali and knew so many languages. He had read the scriptures. He had read Western philosophy. So he was aware of many subjects. And after just 2 meetings with Sri Ramakrishna, he just stopped asking questions, because he proved the first 2 questions itself. He got some wonderful answers. Actually, Sri Ramakrishna's intention was not to snub him, but he felt that it was a slap on his face. All his learning and all the so-called wisdom he had acquired as a result of attending university, he felt that he had much more to learn. As Keshav Chandra Sen, the famous founder of Brahmo Samaj, used to come and sit at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna to learn. So basically, after 2 meetings, he stopped asking questions because he felt that my learning in true spirituality has not yet begun. So he faithfully recorded these conversations. And because of his background of having learned philosophy in the university was there, he could jot down these notes in shorthand and then convert it into this Ramakrishna Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrut in 5 volumes, which is now available as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, its translation. So M had the wisdom. He used to ask questions, but he had stopped arguing after the first 2 meetings when he heard that compared to the wonderful wisdom based on real experience which Sri Ramakrishna had, real experience of spirituality as against an academic understanding of religion or spirituality. They are entirely different things. And this he discovered the very hard way. In the first or second meeting, you will find M. Mahendranath Gupta came with a peculiar idea that one has to read many books to understand. So the first question he asked was, does this person, this Paramahamsa, because he was meeting Ramakrishna for the first time, Sri Ramakrishna, he said, does he read many books? And when that simple maid servant who was working there, though she was illiterate, she said, oh, all the books are in his mouth. I mean, he doesn't have to read them. That was like a shock to him. How can a person who never reads books have any kind of knowledge? What will I gain by sitting here? But later on, he found to his surprise, he was speaking like a great scholar, like a great acharya, or like a, though he was not very familiar with many of the terms. Some of the terms were new to him. Some of the ideas, the inclusive, universal ideas, they were new because he was trained in the university system, which preached, which taught him different subjects like the philosophy of religion as understood by academicians. But here was somebody who was speaking from his own experience. So that's why when you come to the words of Sri Ramakrishna, though they appear very simple, they're profound with meaning. And at the same time, he was a great teacher or a student, you can say, of human nature. Today's conversation will make it very clear. There's no philosophy connected with this. It's just something which we deal with in our everyday life. And the simple answers which he gives while dealing with people, we often try to go to a psychiatrist or maybe a counselor when we find that we can deal with our minds or the minds of people who are dependent on us, and counseling and many things are needed. But here he gives some wonderful counsel. So the topic, the devotees are all sitting in Dakshineshwar and listening to Thakur in deep silence, because they know that the words that will pour out from his mouth will be based, even if they are very, very based on some very, very simple question which every householder confronts in his day-to-day life. The anxieties, the fears, the clashes in their homes, and misunderstandings and failed relationships, and all those things were issues which people came with to Sri Ramakrishna. And as an expert counselor, without of course having a counseling degree or any formal training in counseling, you see how nicely he deals with it. It may appear to be a very trivial topic. And the question here, the subheading that I am has given so aptly, is Sri Ramakrishna and love of mankind, because this has become a very common word. Everybody, right from the teachers to the parents to children, they all say should love mankind, love of mankind. These are all big words, peace and all those things. But hardly do we know how to really love mankind or to find peace within ourselves and peace within the family. Forget trying to establish peace in the society. So here in this topic, Bhavanath, who is a very devoted disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna loved him because he was a very simple, guileless person, having deep faith in not only Sri Ramakrishna, but anything that was spiritual. Sri Ramakrishna loved him and used to point out to other devotees, see this boy, how guilelessly he laughs. He's the most uncomplicated, he was a very uncomplicated devotee who had a nature of a child. And Sri Ramakrishna used to often say, as Jesus said in the Bible, unless you become like little children, the gates of heaven or the kingdom of heaven will not be open to you. So here you will find this Bhavanath, who very often, he was a grown-up man, a young man, but he had the nature of a child, very emotional, very simple, very expressive, and he was the one who used to get lot of bhavas when the kirtan was being sung. Sri Ramakrishna used to point out to M. M was a bit sophisticated, having been educated in the Western system of thought. He thought it was bad manners to just sing and dance when kirtan is going on. Sri Ramakrishna used to now often make fun of him. You see how nicely this Bhavanath becomes ecstatic, and when the kirtan is going on, how he enjoys the kirtan, whereas you sit with such a serious face. He was not grown up, he was also young. M was hardly 29 when he came to Sri Ramakrishna, but somehow he did not feel free. He was shy. Anyway, this Bhavanath is a very humble person, a humble young man. And he's asking a very, very important question. And he's asking a question not as a student of philosophy, neither is he asking a question with the intention of showing off his philosophical knowledge. He's asking a question which he really feels is creating some problems for him. So he says, when Sri Ramakrishna said one should love all, he immediately asks a question, very humbly, not arguing with Sri Ramakrishna. He says, when you don't get along well with a person, your mind will be disturbed. Then how can you love him? Then one can't love everybody. Because there are many people with whom you cannot get along well. And the very presence of that person disturbs your mind. So how with this disturbed mind do you expect me to love everybody equally? You talk of love of mind. Teach me how I can do that. So it's a very practical question, nothing philosophical about it. It's a question which every one of us faces in our daily life. Our scriptures, our saints, all the scriptures tell us to love everybody, love mankind. They are empty words for most of us because we don't even love people who are close to us when there is a difference of opinion. So he is asking this question, when you don't get along well for some reason, your mind becomes disturbed, and with that disturbed mind, you can't love everybody. Then Sri Ramakrishna, instead of talking philosophy to him, he gives some practical solutions. That's the beauty of the gospel. He doesn't try to explain Vedanta to him, how every soul is divine and all those. Nothing. He gives a very practical advice because he knows Bhavanath is somebody who will immediately accept what Sri Ramakrishna tells him because he has the nature of a child. The mother says, this is to be done, the child will do it. He says, first talk it out with that person. He says, if you don't get along well with somebody, just talk it out. See the counsel he gives. try to make up with him. If you fail in your efforts, which normally happens, because it's not so easy to talk and to talk it out with somebody who has some long-standing issue or grudge, and just make him try to make up with that person. Then he says, because he knows the next question would be, if I can't make up with him, in spite of my efforts, if he cannot, then what should I do? Anticipating that question, then he says, if you fail in your efforts, then don't worry. Then take refuge in God and meditate on him. And then he says something more significant. Now, this may seem like a very simple advice. Okay, I take refuge in God, go to my prayer room and just meditate on the Lord. Will it solve the problem? Will it change his mind? That's a question. So it may not change his mind, but then the next line is very important. He says, why do you bother? There is no need to give up God and feel depressed because of other people. That would be a very pitiable state for you. Why should you bother if somebody doesn't respond or somebody doesn't make up with you? Let him be happy with his own life. Why should you bother? Why should you give up God and feel depressed just because of some other people? So take refuge in God, meditate on him. First try to talk it out, because sometimes many misunderstandings could be cleared. Try to make up with him, but if that fails, then just forget. Having done your best, you just forget. There's no need to give up God and waste your time and get disturbed because you cannot obviously, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you cannot obviously please everybody. Then your whole life will be spent in trying to make up with everybody. He says, we don't have so much time, just forget them and just focus on loving God and doing your sadhana. Then Bhavanath again asked the question. He said, they say Christ and Chaitanya both told us to love everyone, even the enemies. Jesus, in fact, said, love thy neighbor as thyself. He says that is the main commandment, and all the commandments are secondary. Love God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. The whole teachings of the prophet hang on these two commandments. And that's why he says the whole of Vedanta is included in that. So Bhavanath is asking, Christ and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu both told us to love everyone. So Sri Ramakrishna now is trying to interpret what does it really mean to love everyone. To love a few people whom you like, it's very easy. That every one of us do. But how to love everyone? That is the question. Again and again, Bhavanath is saying that most of the great prophets like Christ, Chaitanya, they said you have to love everyone. So how is it possible? But Sri Ramakrishna says, love you must. Means you have to love everyone, for God abides in all. But there is a caveat here. But when you come across a wicked person, please salute him from a distance. You try to respect the God in him, but for that reason you don't have to go near him. He says Chaitanya Deva did the same thing. He would restrain his spiritual feelings. It is very important. As Jesus said, don't throw the pearls before a swine. If the swine wants food, it will not appreciate the pearls. Pearls may be valuable to you, may be valuable to human beings, but you don't throw pearls before a swine. It's a very practical advice. So also Sri Ramakrishna says, restrain your spiritual feelings. Don't express it before people, before worldly minded people, because they will not appreciate. He doesn't say worldly minded, he says A wise man would restrain his spiritual feelings in the presence of those of a different nature. Only with like-minded people you can share your spiritual feelings. Otherwise, it will cause problems. Either they will make fun of you, or maybe they may just say something which will diminish your faith. So you have to restrain and behave as if, even if the the spiritual ideas are bubbling inside, you have to restrain it. That is what Hridayaram, who used to serve Sri Ramakrishna, once he saw that many of the devotees are coming to Sri Ramakrishna and they are jumping and dancing in ecstasy, and many of them are saying, we had visions of Krishna, we had visions of God, like Bhavnath and all. They had wonderful experiences. And this Hriday, who was obviously very devoted to his master, his uncle, and served him a lot, but he was the least interested in spirituality, because he was more interested in the rich devotees who came, and he was more interested in the money and the other things. He was a nice person, but extremely materialistic, and always looking to develop contacts with rich people who used to come. So one day he saw that all the other disciples, they are coming for spirituality and they are getting ecstasy, and they are showing a lot of spiritual emotion. And Sri Ramakrishna also seems to see the joy on their face and point out, see Bhavnath, how nicely, what a nice state of mind he is in. So now and then Hriday used to get a bit jealous. So he said, I have served you so much. Why don't you give a few experiences to me? Then Sri Ramakrishna tried to, he knew his nature. So he told Hriday, you don't have to worry. You will get everything at the end. Whatever you are doing, you have served me with so much of sincerity. It is fine. You please continue. These visions are not for you. But Hriday was extremely adamant that day. He said, no, I have to have a vision. You are giving it to everybody, and why I am left out? So he didn't realize that Sri Ramakrishna knew he was not fit. Because he was insisting, Sri Ramakrishna said, okay. So he went and touched his chest. And immediately there was a transformation. Of course, Hriday was not prepared for that. So he started jumping in ecstasy, and he saw Sri Ramakrishna and himself in the form of a divine light. This was a vision which Sri Ramakrishna had almost daily. So he was not expressing it. He was not even bothered about it. Whereas Hriday, for it was an overwhelming experience to see that both of them, like twin lights, they were floating in the air. So he was so carried away by this experience. He started shouting loudly, Hriday. He said, Mama, my uncle, what are we doing here? We are divine beings. Let us just enjoy, the spiritual bliss. And he was making a loud noise. Then Sri Ramakrishna got angry and said, just stop it. And then touched his chest again, and he came back to the normal state. He said, why you are making such a big fuss? I have so many visions. I don't just jump about when I get a small experience or vision. The idea is that one has to restrain these spiritual feelings so that people will think that he is crazy. That's what people would have thought if Hriday started jumping and explaining what experiences he had. So that is why he says Chaitanya would restrain his spiritual feelings in the presence of those who were not fit for it, those who are of a different nature, those who had come with some other purpose. All people don't come for spirituality. They are so much engrossed with their toys, the material toys they are busy with, that they don't feel the need And it would be a waste to talk of spirituality to these people. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. They are divine, no doubt. You have to love them. You have to respect them. But then salute them from a distance. You don't try to express your spiritual, you try to restrain your spiritual feelings, because if those are expressed, they will not understand its value. Just as a swine would not understand the value of pearls. A person who is wearing a pearl necklace will understand the value of pearls, but not a swine. It is happy with whatever it is given to eat. So, then he tells about Srivasa. At Srivasa's home, he forced Srivasa's mother-in-law out of the room, dragging her by the hair. This was a very unpleasant incident. The mother-in-law was obviously a very worldly woman. So he had to drag her out of the room because she was creating such a big commotion. Not that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was full of love. Not that he hated Srivasa's worldly mother-in-law. But when she was creating a disturbance, she even had to take a hard step of dragging her out of the room. Then Bhavanath tries to defend. He says, no, Chaitanya did not do that. She was turned out by somebody else. Then Sri Ramakrishna, of course, the incident goes that somebody else, because she was disturbing the whole atmosphere with her worldly vibrations. So Chaitanya Dev must have told somebody. Of course, he did not drag her. But Sri Ramakrishna says, could anybody do it without his, that is Chaitanya Deva's consent? What else to do if two minds don't agree? Should one keep worrying about the whole night? The mind which should be given to God should not be wasted on these futile things. And he says, I say, Mother, I want none. Only you do I want. What use is a man to me? So that is how Sri Ramakrishna is telling Bhavanath that one has to be practical. One has to love everybody, but that doesn't mean that you go close to wicked people. You have to salute them. You don't have to hate them, but salute them from a distance. So, having attained the Divine Mother, I shall have attained everything. All these coins that you see are clods of earth. And the clods of earth are coins. Taka mati, mati taka. That is the famous thing he used to say. Gold is clay and clay is gold. Saying this, I gave them all up. I threw them into the Ganga. Then I began to fear. You see, like a child is saying that Mother Lakshmi, because they say Lakshmi is the deity of wealth. So I began to fear that Mother Lakshmi might be angry with me because I disregarded her glory. If you remember in the 10th chapter, the Vibhuti Yoga, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that I cannot give you a glimpse or a complete idea of reality, my greatness, the greatness of Ishvara, but I can point out some of the glories, some of the great things in life or in nature, Mother Nature, which remind you of the greatness of the Lord. So that is how everything is deified in Hindu culture, in Vedantic culture. Even money has to be looked upon as divine in the sense it has value only if it is regarded as a representation, or Mother Lakshmi is the personification of all the wealth, material as well as spiritual wealth. So Sri Ramakrishna immediately understood. When he said Takamati and then threw them, he, like a child, says, I felt afraid. Have I offended Mother Lakshmi? Will she get angry with me? Because, they say Lakshmi not only gives you spiritual wealth, but also gives food like Annapurna. So he said, lest she should stop giving me food. And he said, Mother, don't blame me. I want only you. I don't want nothing else. Because having attained Mother, having got the grace of Prakriti, you get everything that is part of Prakriti. You don't have to have a piecemeal approach to get certain things of Prakriti. You worship Shakti, having attained her, then whatever is necessary will come to me. I don't have to bother about this because we are very often do not know what to ask for. Of course, the Divine Mother, according to Sri Ramakrishna, gives only that which the child needs. It's not according to the child's greed that gifts are given. It is according to the child's needs. If something is positively harmful, a benevolent mother will not give it to the child. So he says, if whatever I want, I can ask the Divine Mother and she gives it to me. So why should I bother about anything else? Then Bhavanath smiles and makes fun of Sri Ramakrishna, though he is his disciple. He says, that is a very good, astute calculation. Then Sri Ramakrishna laughs. Yes, that is only that much calculation. That means I am not a calculative person, but I know for certain that if you have the grace of Mother, you will have the grace, you can have everything. Then he gives a wonderful, of course, he cracks a joke, saying how worldly people approach the Divine Mother, because people have a lot of desires and how calculative they are even while asking for boons. So he says, once Bhagwan appeared before a certain person and said, I am very pleased. Of course, that devotee or did a lot of penance. You don't get everything for free. You have to please the mother. So he did a lot of penance. And the Lord, of course, appeared before that person and said, I am very pleased with your penance. In the Puranas, you have a lot of stories where Shiva and all, even the Asuras, they want some powers, they'll pray to Shiva and Shiva comes like Ashutosha, is very easily pleased with all the tapasya. And then he says, what do you want? And then he gives whatever the person asks for without thinking. And the Asuras misuse it. Then Narayana or Vishnu has to come and see that that power is not misused. So here also Bhagavan appeared. Now this person was very wise, very calculative person. So as soon as Bhagavan asks him, gives him a vision, I am very pleased with your penance, ask me for a boon. Now this person knew that if I ask for one thing, I may not get the other thing. So he tells, Bhagavan, if you are granting me a boon, in one sentence he asked everything. If you want to grant me a boon, then he combined all his desires very tactfully. You see, that is how calculative people are. Please grant me a boon that I may eat on a gold plate with my grandson. Now he is asking for so many things in one sentence. So much he was accomplished through one boon. He became wealthy. Obviously, if he has to eat with his grandson, he has to live long, healthy life. And then he has to even afford a golden plate in which he can eat. He has to have a lot of wealth. So instead of asking only for wealth or a long life or good health and also a grandson, he asked everything in one, so that he just asked, grant me a boon that I may eat in a golden plate with my grandson. That means he has a long life, at least long enough to have a grandson and eat with him. He says he became wealthy, begot a son and then a grandson. So he was just joking. He said, I am not like that. I am calculative, but only a little, not like this person who asks for worldly things. Normally, people are very calculative. When they go to even their prayer is very calculating. Because having learned, they think the techniques which make you successful in the world can be used with God, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. So now the Sri Ramakrishna has started a new topic when he said, I don't know, I am not so calculative, I just want the mother. If people agree with me, fine, they can go with me. If they don't agree with me, I don't care. He says, I don't have much time. to solve these disputes. If people don't understand me, what can I do? You have to simply go on with your sadhana. That's the idea. And devotees are all seated in a room, and another crook or a cunning person who used to create a lot of trouble for Ramakrishna and all his disciples was Hajra. You all know what Pratap Chandra Hajra did. He was the one who very cleverly, in a very calculated way, pretended to be a saint and stayed in Dakshineshwar because he owed a lot of money to many people. So he had no means of even looking after his family and children, wife and children. So he put them all in his in-laws' place, that is the girl's father's place. And that poor old man was looking after his wife and children. And here he pretended to be a great saint, taking his mala and doing japa. So Sri Ramakrishna, of course, used to make fun. Many times he told him, this is not correct. You have married, you have produced children, and your old father has to look after them, or your father-in-law has to look after them. Why are you burdening him? Are you not ashamed? This is not how you practice religion. Go back. But that had no effect. He would continue and not only stay here, but continue to create trouble for everybody, for the genuine devotees. Anyway, that was part of the Leela. So Sri Ramakrishna very humorously says, do you know what Hajra wants? He needs some money urgently. You know, his family is in distress. He is in lot of debt. That is why he practices japa and meditation, to get some money. Then a devotee, perhaps he was not as bad as Hajra, but he was also perhaps expecting that the Lord should grant the devotee what is wrong if we ask for money. So the devotee is asking Sri Ramakrishna, can't God fulfill a devotee's desire? What is wrong if we ask for money? Let him ask. So the devotee wants some kind of confirmation that can we not ask what is wrong? Then Sri Ramakrishna gives a very, very nice answer. If God is, his question was, will not God fulfill somebody's desire? Maybe he's asking for money, but if he's all powerful, he should fulfill the desire. That was the idea. So Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful answer. He says, yes, he can fulfill if it is his will, God's will. But the Lord does not take the burden of a person unless he is intoxicated by intense love for him. We have that famous verse of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna promises Arjuna, Yoga kshemam vahamyaham ananyas chintayanto ma ye jana paryupasate tesham, only of those people, nitya abhiyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyaham. Now people quote only that last line, last phrase, that the Lord will take, if you pray to the Lord will take care of yoga and kshema. Yoga means trying to acquire something which you desire, not in the sense of Patanjali's yoga, but here yoga means to get things. Kshema means to protect what you already have. Suppose you don't have wealth, the Lord will take care of providing you with wealth and protecting what you already have so that you don't lose it. That is how people try to understand that. Said Lord, as once you pray to him, he will fulfill all our desires. But really speaking, Sri Ramakrishna points out to the first line of the sentence, Ananyas Chintayanto ma. Lord will not take your burden. He will not give you yoga and kshema if you are intoxicated, if you are not intoxicated with intense love for him. Without thinking of anything else, if you totally depend on him, under such circumstances only the Lord will help you. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives a very simple example. Perhaps this devotee is not able to understand. What do you mean by unswerving attention or unswerving prayer to the Lord? Only in such a case he will take the burden. He will not take the burden of somebody who is not devoted to the Lord. So only one who has totally surrendered to the Lord, he takes care. We have seen in the life of Sri Ramakrishna himself. He sent Mathur Babu, whatever he needed, somehow came to him unasked for. So the Lord sends it unasked for. Then he gives a nice example. He says, someone holds a child by the hand and makes him sit for his meal at a feast. Who does so in the case of old people? Now, there is something very significant in this. What does he mean by this? He says, when you see small children who are helpless, who have faith, old people have been beaten by a lot of trouble, they have lost trust, lost faith. Most of the people in their old age, they become very pessimistic, very negative. They'll keep on complaining. Nobody bothers about me. Nobody looks after me. So Sri Ramakrishna is giving this example to show that if the child is young, full of faith in its mother, then the mother or the parent will hold the hand of that child because they know the child is helpless. But who will do so in the case of old people? Because their faith is not like that of a child. They have done so many things in life. They have tried to manipulate things, and then people perhaps do not have that kind of concern or compassion for old people as they have for small, helpless children. So Sri Ramakrishna says God's love is also like that. If you are really surrendered in the spirit of a child, not out of calculation, if you go like old people who have calculated their entire life, and at the end of their life they want God to somehow help them, then perhaps God may not help. That is what he says. The parents will hold a child by the hand and even make him sit with them, prepare a meal, feed that child at a feast. But who does so in the case of old people? When one meditates on him and cannot take care of himself, that is known as Sharanagati. The Lord then, only then the Lord takes responsibility for him. Because the child cannot take care of itself, it is helpless. I mean, he's not saying we can't take this literally. It is a symbolic parable or an example given by Sri Ramakrishna to show that the innocence and the helplessness and the faith, the pure faith of the child or the pure prayer of the child moves the parents and they take care. So also with God. So if one meditates on him, depending fully on him, the Lord then takes responsibility for him. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is continuing, referring to Hajra. He, Hajra, does not inquire about his family. Hajra's son once said to Ramlal, Ramlal was a nephew of Sri Ramakrishna, ask my father to come home. We shall not ask him for anything. Hearing this, I began to weep. Sri Ramakrishna felt so bad. Hajra's young son, Ramlal, happened to visit his family, his wife and children whom he had abandoned in his father-in-law's house. And he repeatedly, Sri Ramakrishna said, how can you get God if you are supposed to look after them? Why did you marry? Why did you have children? And now somebody else has to look after them. And Sri Ramakrishna was so emotional when he heard that young child of Hajra telling Ramlal that please ask my father to come home. And he's saying, he says, we don't want anything from him. He knows that if we ask, he will perhaps not come. He just wants to be with his father. Hearing this, Sri Ramakrishna felt very bad. See the pitiable condition of a father who has left the whole family and coming here and acting as if he is practicing spirituality. And the young son says, we don't want anything from him. Please tell him to just come back. Hearing this, Sri Ramakrishna could not tolerate. He said, how rude this person can be. So then Hajra's mother said to Ramlal, Hajra's mother once told, ask Pratap to come home and ask your uncle, uncle means Ramakrishna, in my name to please send Pratap. I asked him to go, but he didn't listen. So Sri Ramakrishna said, how can I convince him? He is not listening to me. Then he says, how great is one's mother? How long Chaitanya Deva had to implore his mother before he was allowed to leave family life and embrace sannyasa. It was not that he just left. He says even Chaitanya Deva was such a great incarnation. Like Shankaracharya, he had to plead with his mother. And only when he was about to be devoured by the crocodile, she unwillingly gave him permission and the Gerua cloth. And then he joyfully renounced the world and left. So also he says, if Hajra was really sincere, he would have convinced his mother and then come, not just leaving them at their mercy. He says, how great is one's mother? How long Chaitanya Deva had to implore his mother. She was not giving him permission to become a disciple of his guru and take sannyasa, though he was full of devotion for God. He said, she was so angry. Sachi, Chaitanya Deva's mother, said, I will cut Keshav Bharati asunder. That means she was so angry with Chaitanya Deva's guru, Keshav Bharati, that out of anger, she was literally distressed at the loss, the prospect of the loss of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he said, she even went to the extent of saying, I'll cut this Keshav Bharati and kill him. Chaitanya Deva had to beseech her to give her approval for his sannyasa. He said, Mother, if you don't approve of it, I won't go. But remember, if you force and keep me at home, then I will not live, I will not survive. So when she heard that, she thought it's better that he lives. And he was not joking, he was very clear that I can't live in this world. If you approve of it, if you don't approve of it, I will not go. Till you approve, I won't go. But if you keep me at home, force me, then I will die. Now you choose what you want to do. Besides, mother, you will be able to see me whenever you remember me. I shall not be far from you. And I will come to see you every now and then. It was only then that Sachi, that is, she's Chaitanya Deva's mother, Gaurang Mahaprabhu's mother. So he said, she permitted him to leave only when he had to go to the extent of saying that if you force me to stay here, I will stay, I will not go. If you don't allow me to, but then I will not live. Now you decide whether you want a dead son or a son who has embraced sannyasa but still alive. So as long as his mother was alive, he's telling this just to convince Hajra, to convince others that what Hajra has done is not good. As long as his mother was alive, Narada could not, this is another incident he is referring to, Narada could not leave her to practice austerities. Narada is a famous rishi of the Puranas. But as long as his mother was alive, even in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find till the end he served his mother. And even though he had taken sannyasa from Totapuri, he requested his guru that I will wear the Gerua cloth inside, but outside I'll wear white clothes, otherwise my mother will die of shock. Until her last, he served her, though he had taken formal sannyasa from Totapuri. So as long as his mother was alive, Narada could not leave her to practice austerities. He had to take care of her, you see. It was only after her death that Narada went away to practice spiritual discipline in order to realize Hari. So this is... So there is another incident which he speaks of his own devotion to his own mother, Chandramani Devi, who was in Dakshineshwar, and Mathur Babu had arranged for a trip to Brindavan, because that was his desire, visiting Brindavan, Banaras. So he had made elaborate arrangements for Sri Ramakrishna. Obviously, Sri Ramakrishna's mother was very old, so she was left behind in Dakshineshwar. So he says, when I was at Vrindavan, I did not want to return. He enjoyed the atmosphere of Vrindavan. He wanted to permanently stay there. Sri Ramakrishna felt that it is such a wonderful place for spiritual practices. So it was arranged for me to stay with Gangama. Gangama was a very, very old lady, very devoted Vaishnava lady. And he lived with in that kutia, the small place where she lived. And he was so happy to be in her company, holy company. And I resolved not to return to Calcutta. And he used to make fun that how long must I eat that kaivartas? Kaivarta means they are like a fisherman community. He said, here I get the pure food cooked by Gangama and the holy, I can repeat the holy name to my heart's content. Why should I go back to Dakshineshwar and eat that food cooked by anybody and everybody? I asked myself, but Hriday said, no, you must return to Calcutta. He was afraid that his mama will stay here. He pulled me one way and Gangama dragged me another. Gangama was not keen to leave Sri Ramakrishna. So, but he had a great desire to live there in Vrindavan. But he says, suddenly the thought of my mother came to me. My whole attitude changed immediately. And he said, I felt my mother is old now. I said to myself, if I keep worrying about her sitting here, then how can I meditate on the Lord? I would rather return to her. There I will meditate on the Lord with a free mind. So he's telling Narendra now, you too please ask Hajra to go home. The other day he said he would go and stay there for 3 days. But even for 3 days he has not gone home. So then Narendra sings a beautiful song and we'll conclude now. If there is some question you can ask. We have just a few minutes. We'll be concluding. If there are some questions, you can ask. Any questions?
So if you fully depend on God,
Yes.
God will take care of you.
Yes, that is promised by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and also Sri Ramakrishna said. But the words, the question is, if you fully depend on God, will He take care of you? So history has shown, if you see the lives of most of the saints, they were so absorbed in their devotions and prayers and other things that they had hardly, though some of them were householders, like Narsim Mehta was there, the Gujarati saint who had a daughter also. So somehow in some mysterious way, Sri Krishna helped. His only job was to sing his praise, and he was abused, criticized, people were jealous of him, but he passed through all the tests. So also you find in Tukaram's life, his wife was very worldly. So also in Tulsidasa's life, many such incidents are there which confirm, but the conditions are very stringent. It's not that you say, we say that I depend on God, but very often it should be real dependence. It's not that we depend whenever it suits us, we'll depend on the Lord. Whenever it suits us, we'll depend on ourselves and try to find out our own solutions. Then it does not work. That is what Sri Ramakrishna points out here. He says, the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ananyas Chintayanto Ma Ye Jana Paryupasate. Upasate means worships. Paryupasate means worships with full devotion and faith, without giving thought to anything else. So that kind of devotion is very difficult. If that, and Tesham Nitya Abhiyuktanam, those who are eternally attached to me, means eternally attached or dependent on the Lord, to such people, I take care of their yoga and kshema, means I take care of whatever they need and I take care of also whatever they already have. I protect it. Yoga kshema means like that. It is some kind of our Indian life insurance company have that logo. Yoga kshema means insurance insures you. It protects whatever you have and it helps you to get what you don't have. So that's the idea. So the Lord guarantees that only the only condition being that one has to depend 100%.
In a practical life,
Practical life, obviously, we have to deal with all the problems ourselves to the extent we can. When we can't do, then we have to depend on the Lord. We have to follow a more pragmatic approach because we don't have faith. If we don't have faith, then God has given us strength to handle our own problems. So when we can do it, why don't depend on the Lord? But if you're so, there are some people who, for them, religion or spirituality is a full-time thing. So in that case, they don't have to worry. But of course, they won't get yoga kshema doesn't mean they will get a lot of wealth or anything. Whatever they need for survival, they will get.
Prayer and meditation, if you're depending on which way does it fall? Like,
Pardon?
prayers and meditation.
Yes.
So
When do?
if we say we depend on God, then where does prayer and meditation come into the picture?
See, prayer and meditation are two different. Yeah. I'll tell you. It's a good question. Prayer and meditation. The question is, in the ultimate scheme of life, in spiritual life, what is the difference between prayer and meditation? And how does prayer help and how does meditation help? Actually, meditation is a path which we follow in Raj Yoga or yoga, whereas prayer is more of bhakti. So most of the Semitic religions who believe in the Supreme, they have a very strong tradition of prayer. In prayer, it is the emotions which are uppermost. When you pray, you obviously don't pray in words. You pray with your heart. That's why Jesus says in the Bible, pray with your whole mind, with your whole heart, with your whole soul. That means all the faculties at your disposal, you have to pray. Now the question may arise, if for people who don't have that kind of emotion, like people who follow yoga, for them meditation is a technique where they systematically follow the 8 steps that lead to meditation. Meditation is the 7th step. Then after dhyana comes samadhi. So there is no question of any emotion involved, whether you are emotional or not, whether you have that emotional attachment, because you first of all don't believe in a God with form. You believe in the divinity within. You believe in some truth within. You practice all the necessity steps, yama, niyama, pranayama, asana, the first 4 steps, then pratyahara, dharana, concentration. So meditation deals with that aspect of yoga where you deal only with cognition or thoughts. Of course, there are thoughts are also, emotions are also thoughts. Because every thought, when an emotion is attached to it, it becomes an emotional thought. So you can't separate emotion and thoughts, strictly speaking. But in yoga, they say whether it is attached with emotion or whether it is just a thought, in any case, you have to control it. And by controlling or restraining thoughts, you realize your true nature. So that's the difference. When we approach God as a personal, impersonal God, then yoga becomes more easy because you don't have to depend on a particular form of God. You don't believe. Whereas in bhakti or in prayer, you begin with an emotional attachment to the Lord, who is either the Son of God, or who is God Himself, or who is an avatara, or is the person who takes you to God. So there is that prayer implies that there is an emotional attachment, and you direct the emotions, not just the thoughts. Of course, you have to think of the Lord to be emotionally attached to Him. So
That
thought,
will be very, fluctuating, no? Your emotions.
yeah. So if you are not in a emotional, if your emotions are under control, then yoga is the way. Meditation can be more helpful. But if the emotions are disturbing you, then you can direct it, and then it can be converted into prayer. So basically, both are equally effective. It depends on what mood you are in. Okay.
Is it either or?
No, it's both,
Depends
because
on
the
what-
emotions do come and go. There is no guarantee that sometimes suddenly emotions come. Yeah, sometimes you are free from emotions. That is the ideal state, where you don't let the emotions affect your thoughts. And the thoughts can be easily controlled. But if they are tinged with emotions, then it is difficult to control them. Tinged with emotions like fear. There is fear, not necessarily, there are hundreds of emotions: fear, anxiety, worry. So, all those things are connected with thoughts. So, ultimately, it boils down to control of thoughts. But whether you are controlling an emotional thought, or whether you are controlling a non emotional, just plain thought which causes emotion, then you follow the path of yoga or follow the path of prayer. Both are equally effective.
So Sharon is asking, is the guided meditation you led on 16th last month available, please?
Yeah, somebody, if you want, I'll send it to you on. We would have obviously in our some other class. Today I forgot. We will begin with guided meditation, or we'll conclude with guided meditation. But today we are running short of time. But I can send the text to you. I can send the text today itself. I'll send it on WhatsApp. Okay.
She's saying thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.